during the week. However, when they wake up, they always make too much noise and wake you up as well. If you wanted to implement a differential reinforcement procedure targeting the noise-making behavior, what differential reinforcement procedure would be best? Okay, we're starting off with a fairly difficult question. It's going to be up to you to identify what differential reinforcement procedure would be best to reduce the amount of noise. Okay, so let's look at our options, right? Let's go through our process for picking out a differential reinforcement answer. Differential reinforcement of other behaviors, or DRO. What are we doing with the DRO? Well, we are reinforcing in the absence of a behavior. So in this case, you want the noise to be reduced or to go away. So reducing when there is no noise seems like a pretty good idea, right? So DRA is a pretty good option. However, on the RBT exam, we want the best answer, right? So we always want to read all of our answer choices, because although DRO is a good choice, we might have a better choice. What about DRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors? Well, what's wrong with DRA? Well, with DRA, the behavior you're trying to reduce can occur at the same time as the behavior you're trying to increase. We want to reduce the noise or eliminate it, so we don't want that behavior to occur at all. With DRA, we would still be delivering reinforcement if the noise was occurring, and we don't want that. DRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors. This way, our replacement behavior that we're teaching can't occur at the same time as the noise making, okay? In addition, what makes it better than DRO is DRI actually teaches a replacement behavior. With DRO, you're only reducing a behavior. You're not actually teaching a replacement. So DRI is better than DRO for this particular behavior. Not only are we going to reduce the amount of noise, our replacement behavior can't occur at the same time as the making noise behavior. So our best reinforcement procedure is DRI. DRH is most likely not on your exam, but that's increasing the behavior. We want to decrease it. This is a hard question to start off with, okay? It's okay, especially if you're new to studying. If you didn't get this one right, go back, relearn, restudy differential reinforcement. It's one of the more difficult concepts on the exam. So don't be discouraged, okay? Just review it. Do this question a few times until you really understand why DRI is better than DRO. During the first 2 weeks of DTT with your client, use the FR1 continuous reinforcement schedule. You then transition into an FR3 reinforcement schedule. 2 months later, you are now using a VR6 reinforcement schedule. What best describes what you are doing in terms of the reinforcement schedule? So what are we doing? We're doing some DTT with our client. Apparently the client is getting better or getting quicker because we are slowly what? Well, we're increasing the response requirement, right? FR1, every single response gets reinforced. FR3, every third response gets reinforced. VR6, now we're on an average of 6, right? So 3 responses could be reinforced, or 9 could be reinforced, right? VR6 is a very thin schedule. So if you are going from an FR1 to an FR3 to a VR6, you're increasing the response requirement. And what else? Are you thickening the schedule or are you thinning the schedule? You are thinning the schedule, okay? When we increase the response requirement, we thin the schedule. So our answer here is B. Always read the other answer choices, especially when you're studying. Read all the answer choices and understand why the wrong answers are wrong. So C, providing more reinforcement to the client. Why is this wrong? Well, we're providing less reinforcement. FR1, every response is getting reinforced. 10 responses, 10 reinforcers. VR6, we might go 10 responses, only 1 reinforcer. And then D, reducing the response requirement, we're increasing the response requirement. It requires a lot more responses to get or generate reinforcers than it does on an FR1 schedule, okay? So we are thinning the schedule and increasing the response requirement. Michael wants to dunk a basketball. A basketball goal is 10 feet high. Michael asks his friend to measure how high he jumps and to provide him with reinforcement each time he jumps higher than the last measurement. Michael does this until he is able to dunk. What procedure is Michael and his friend using? So Michael is slowly increasing his ability to jump higher. What is Michael's ultimate goal? His ultimate goal is to jump 10 feet high / dunk a basketball. So if we are reinforcing larger instances of behavior towards a goal or terminal behavior, in other words, successive approximations of behavior, what are we doing? That's what Michael's friend is doing. Each successive approximation of 10 feet is reinforced. So if Michael jumps 2 feet, then 4 feet, then 6 feet, then 8 feet, we're trying to get that behavior all the way up to what? 10 feet and dunking a basketball. So what procedure is this? This is A, shaping, textbook shaping, right? Reinforcing this approximation of this dunking or 10 feet high behavior, okay? Each time he jumps a little higher, he gets reinforced. Textbook shaping, okay? Very easy question, actually. So if you've been studying, you should be able to answer this question fairly quickly, okay? Remember, read all of your answer choices, understand why they're wrong. Be fading. We're not fading reinforcement here, right? We're still providing reinforcement, okay? We're just providing reinforcement for another approximation of the behavior. FCT, what is FCT? FCT is functional communication training. We're not teaching communication here. And then extinction. Extinction is removing reinforcement from a previously reinforced behavior. Now what we're doing, we're still providing reinforcement for the jumping, right? We're just trying to increase the jump, okay? The jumping behavior is the same. We just want to increase it and strengthen it. Therefore, we are shaping Michael's jumping behavior until he can dunk. It is difficult to find reinforcers for your client. Your client barely responds even during preference assessments. Your BCBA tells you to just use chocolate as a reinforcer during your next session. However, when you start the next session, the client's dad informs you that he does not want you using chocolate as a reinforcer. What should you do? This is pretty common. If it's difficult to find a reinforcer for a client, a lot of times BCBAs would just shift to edibles. Edibles are very reinforcing for the most part, okay? They can be used in a variety of situations. However, there are some issues with edibles, such as health concerns, difficulty removing them as a reinforcer, okay? And then, of course, parent concerns. So the client's dad says, I don't want you using chocolate as a reinforcer. But your BCBA just told you to use chocolate as a reinforcer. Pretty tough spot for the RBT to be in. What do? A, respect the parent's request. Do not use chocolate as a reinforcer ever. Okay, so A, yes, you want to respect the parent's request, right? But do not use chocolate as a reinforcer ever is a very strong answer, okay? So can we find a better answer here, right? If there are no better answers, then A might be acceptable. But never using chocolate ever, especially not having talked to your BCBA yet, okay, is very strong. So let's look at our other answer choices first. B, respect your BCBA's request. Use the chocolate anyway. Definitely not, okay. The parent has say in this scenario. And again, you haven't discussed what the parent said with your BCBA, okay? So B is incorrect. C, train the parent on why we're using chocolate as a reinforcer so that they understand. No, RBTs do not train parents, okay? We are not parent trainers as RBTs, right? That is the role of the BCBA. So C is definitely out. What about D? Respect the parent's request. Communicate with your BCBA on next steps to take. Yes, so D is similar to A, right? Because we're not going to use the chocolate. However, instead of just not using chocolate ever, we're going to communicate with our team, right? And figure out next steps. Because what the BCBA might do is talk to the parent and explain that we're going to use chocolate and then pair it with other stimuli to create new reinforcers, okay? So there might be other steps to take rather than never using chocolate ever. So A is okay. It's too strong. Our best answer is D. Respect the parent's request. Communicate with your BCBA on what steps we should take next. On ethics questions, okay, you want a strong answer, but you don't want to go over the top, right? Remember your task list. All these ethics questions are taken straight from your task list. Okay. Think about communicating with your supervisor, right? Respecting client dignity, respecting parents' wishes. Okay. Keep those things in mind when answering these questions. During a road trip, David is counting the number of cows he sees. After he saw the first cow, he didn't see another cow for another 15 minutes. He saw his third cow 10 minutes later and his fourth cow 5 minutes later. What is David's total IRT for seeing cows? So, what is IRT? IRT is the time in between two responses, okay? So, we're looking at the response or the behavior of seeing cows, right? So, what are we looking at here, right? We need to figure out when is the first time David saw a cow, okay? And then we need to figure out the second time, because that's going to be our first instance of inter-response time, right? When using IRT, the first response doesn't count as far as IRT goes, okay? The first instance of IRT is between the first response and the second response, okay? The time between the SD and the first response is latency. We need IRT. So David sees his first cow, right? And then he saw his second cow 15 minutes later. So our first instance of IRT is 15 minutes. He saw his third cow 10 minutes later. So the time in between the second cow and the third cow is 10 minutes. So we're at a total of 25 minutes. And then he saw his fourth cow 5 minutes later. So the time in between the third cow and the fourth cow was 5 minutes. We are now at a total of 30 minutes. David's total IRT for seeing cows is what? 30 minutes. Okay. So on the test, they might ask you to do some simple calculations like this. They might ask for percentages or averages, right? As long as you understand the measurement they're asking for, it's as simple as that, right? Figure out the IRT, write it down if you have to. You get pencil and paper, write it down if you have to, and just add it up. So again, between the first and second cow, 15 minutes, second and third, 10 minutes, which is 25, third and fourth, 5 minutes, 30. David's total IRT for seeing cows is 30 minutes. Nate is a 10-year-old with Down syndrome. He attends school full-time and typically does well. However, Nate has trouble finding his classroom in the morning. His first class is science, but he often walks into the lunchroom instead. What procedure would be best for helping Nate go to the correct classroom? So what is Nate lacking here? Okay, Nate is having difficulty what? He's having difficulty identifying what room is correct, telling the difference between each classroom, and you need to help him. What procedure are you going to use to help Nate figure out what classroom is different? And if you know the word here, right, then this question's easy. You can jump immediately to the right answer, okay? But let's go through the answer choices. A, task chaining. Are we doing any sort of task analysis? Are there steps to this? No, right? We just need one response, which is Nate walking to the right classroom, okay? We don't need to break this down into smaller steps, right? We just need to figure out how to help Nate tell the difference between two classrooms. Again, think of that word. What are we doing? When we're telling the difference between two stimulus, what are we doing? Punishment procedure. Are we going to punish Nate? No, right? We never jump to punishment one. We always try to use reinforcement first, right? There's just no indication that punishment is needed here. C, discrimination training. Absolutely. Discrimination is that word that I was hoping you would think of, okay, while we were talking about this question. When we're trying to tell the difference between two stimuli or tell the difference between two or three anything, we're learning to discriminate. Red versus blue, right? Dog versus cat. We need Nate to discriminate between lunchroom and science room. So we would use discrimination training to help Nate achieve this goal. And then maintenance training. Maintenance would come after Nate learns the skill, okay? We're still teaching it. So discrimination training would be our best intervention to use. If a behavior occurs when a person is alone, has access to all preferred items, and doesn't have any demands placed on them, then the most likely function of that behavior is what? Okay, so a function behavior question, right? We have all of our functions here: attention, escape, tangible, automatic, sensory. Remember, automatic and sensory are the same function, okay? So What is the function of the behavior? The function of the behavior is the reason the behavior occurs, right? So this behavior is occurring when the person is alone. If they're alone, we can probably rule out what? We can probably rule out attention, right? There's nobody around to give them attention. They're not actively seeking attention, most likely, okay? And the definition of automatic, the function of an automatic behavior or sensory behavior is behavior that occurs when the person is alone and is self-reinforcing. The client has access to all preferred items. So it's not like they're trying to gain anything, right? They're not trying to earn a tangible. So we can eliminate C. And doesn't have any demands placed on them. So they're not trying to escape from anything. So most likely the function of this behavior is what? Automatic or sensory, okay? They're not trying to, the behavior is not trying to get attention, escape from anything, or get a tangible, okay? If we're not doing those three things, then that leaves us with the most likely explanation of automatic sensory. This is a more high-level question about functions, okay? Go through it a few times if you don't understand it, right? But just think about why the behavior occurs and why the behavior wouldn't need to occur. If you have all the items you need, you don't need tangibles. If you don't have any demands, you don't need to escape. And if no one's around, there's no one to give you attention. So most likely it's automatic sensory. Session notes help your team understand what occurs during your sessions. Which of the following answer choices is not part of session notes? Remember, our session notes, straight from the task list, need to be what? Need to be complete, need to be objective, right? Need to describe your day. So what aren't we including in session notes? A, what behaviors occurred? This is very important to include, right? You're a behavior technician. Working on behaviors is your job. So we want to include behaviors that occurred, especially new behaviors. B, your opinion on what occurred during session. No, right? This is not the time to give your opinion. Session notes need to be objective. You need to write exactly what happened, what you saw, nothing more, okay? This is not time to write a novel about your opinion on what occurred. You can talk to your BCBA about it. If there's a separate place for notes in your session notes, maybe you can write it there. But when we're doing session notes, they need to be objective, okay? They need to just report on what happened objectively and what you saw. C, an objective description of session. Absolutely. D, any skill that was mastered. Sure. What we want to avoid is opinionated, subjective descriptions. Anytime you, the client, or someone else is in danger, you should what? So what is it considered when someone is in danger, when you're in danger of a client? It's considered a crisis or an emergency. So when this happens, what do? A, call your supervisor immediately. Yes, you want to call your supervisor, but if someone's in danger, you need to respond to that first, okay? After the danger is neutralized or is no longer there, then you can start communicating. But if there's a crisis, you need to respond to the crisis first. Same thing with B, call the client's parent immediately. If you're at home, maybe you can start yelling for them or get their attention, but you need to respond to the crisis first. Therefore, you should do what? C, implement the crisis plan immediately, okay? This is why it's so important to have a crisis emergency plan in place. So when someone is in danger, you can immediately jump into action and you don't need to wait for a supervisor or a client because then it might be too late. So if someone is in danger, you should immediately implement your crisis plan and then start calling supervisors and parents. D, implement extinction. No, right? You shouldn't be ignoring whatever's going on. React based on what the plan tells you. Your BCBA tells you that based on an interview with the client's mom, the client likes to play with fire trucks, crayons, and Legos. You prepare for session by gathering these items to use in a preference assessment. What kind of data did you use to make this decision? So what kind of data are we using? How do we know the client likes fire trucks, crayons, and Legos? Well, your BCBA conducted an interview. So the only data we have so far based on this scenario is interview data. What kind of data is interview data? Is it indirect, direct, functional analysis, or naturalistic? Well, it's definitely not naturalistic, right? Because it's a prepared, scheduled interview, right? Naturalistic is just occurring in the general environment. This is contrived. It's not functional analysis, okay? Functional analysis is actually determining the function of behaviors, okay? We just interviewed the client on what they like to play with. So it leaves us with indirect and direct. Well, direct is when we observe the client and we watch their behavior and we take data on their behavior. Are we observing the client in the scenario? No, we're interviewing the client's mom. So any sort of interview, checklist, survey, anytime we're not directly observing the client, what data are we taking? We are taking indirect data. So we're using indirect interview data to make this decision. Okay, I hope you enjoyed. Please comment below, like, subscribe, and check out all of our study materials at our website, rbtexamreview.com. Let us know when you pass so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Other than that, I'll be back Friday with some BCBA questions and then Sunday with a shout out. And we will keep rolling next week with more RBT questions. Keep working hard, keep studying hard. I'll see you soon.